Good evening, kids. All right, we're here for another week, another Wednesday night service, and I wanted to tell y'all that I hope y'all had a wonderful Easter. I hope y'all enjoyed the messages that have been brought so far, and I hope y'all will enjoy tonight. So, about thinking about what I wanted to talk to y'all about tonight, I couldn't help but think about the faith that we need to get through this pandemic that we're going through, this coronavirus that we're going through. And it's not faith in ourselves, it's not faith in our government or our health workers or anything like that. It's our faith in God. There are plenty of people in the Bible that we could speak about that showed faith in God. But there's one man tonight that I wanted to talk to y'all about. And he was one of God's disciples. And we'll get into that. First, I wanted to ask y'all, how many of y'all know how to swim? You know, living in Hawaii, we're surrounded by water. There's water sports everywhere. I'm sure, if not all of y'all, 90% of y'all know how to swim to some degree. Y'all may not be perfect at it, but y'all know how to swim. I know how to swim. But it's so much fun getting out there in the water, especially for a bigger guy my size. You know, you get out in the water and you don't feel so heavy. You get to feel lighter and you just float around and you can swim and see a lot of God's wonders underneath the surface, especially when I'm scuba diving. It's just so amazing to see the life underneath the water. But there's plenty of other stuff you can skimboard, paddleboard, kayak, surf, bodyboard, things like that. And there's numerous water activities that we can do here in Hawaii. Well, can any of y'all float? I know I have a hard time floating. Miss West always tries to show me how to float whenever we're in the pool or whatever, but my legs, for some reason, just always sink to the ground or sink down. But how many of y'all can float? Can anyone float on your back, your stomach, your knees? Can any of y'all float standing up? I doubt it. Of course not. Nobody can float standing up. But the man that we're going to talk about today could stand up and walk on top of water. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 14, and we're going to read, and starting in verse 22. All right? And it says, "And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into his ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitude away." Now this takes place after they had fed the 5,000 with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, after Jesus had already performed that miracle. All right, and Jesus is sending his disciples in the boat to go across the Sea of Galilee because he needed some time to himself to pray. And continuing on in verse 23, it says, "And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It's a spirit. And they cried out for fear." So like I said, Jesus wanted some time alone in prayer, so he told his disciples to go ahead of him and take the boat to the other side of the lake, or the Sea of Galilee. And in the middle of the night, the disciples were caught in this crazy storm with giant waves. And they were all scared, just like we all would be if we were in a boat and we were caught in a storm. And they looked over and they saw Jesus walking towards them on the water, except at the beginning they did not know it was Jesus. They thought it was just some spirit walking on the water. They thought that they were seeing a ghost. And if we continue on reading, it says in verse 27, "But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid." So now they know that it was Jesus. And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water." In verse 29, it says, "And he said," talking about Jesus, "Come." And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. you see, Peter had that faith in God that he would be able to do anything. And he told Jesus, he's like, Jesus, if it is you, bid me to come out into the water and walk to you. And like I said, the Lord said, come. And we see that in verse 29. And he said, come. All right. When Jesus heard them, Jesus told them, hey, it's okay. It's me. It's the Lord. And Peter called out, Lord, tell me to come to you if it's really you. And Jesus, the one word he spoke to him was come. So at that time, Peter was full of faith because he had already seen many miracles that Jesus had performed. And he knew that, hey, this is Jesus. I have faith that Jesus says, come, I'm going to come out. I'm going to walk over to him. So Peter got out of the boat and began walking toward Jesus. And he was walking on the water just like Jesus was. We see that represented. I have a representation of Peter right here. This is my representation of Peter. And at this time, this glass that I have right here, this represents faith. Right? I have two glasses. One represents faith, one represents doubt. So at this time, Peter is showing faith in God. He's showing faith in Jesus that Jesus said, come, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to walk to him. And Peter is out there floating in the water. Right? Just like we all do, when something is going good for it, we start looking around like, oh man, something's going to happen. That's the same thing Peter did. And in verse 30, we continue reading. It says, but when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. So Peter was overtaken by fear. He let his faith leave him, his faith in Jesus leave him, and his fear overtook him. He's having these huge waves, this strong wind, and he started getting scared. And he took his eyes off Jesus like we do so many times, and he started to sink. So now we take Peter, after having that faith and being able to float or being able to walk on water, Peter loses his faith and he begins to doubt God. And what happens when we doubt God? We sink. We no longer float. And that's what happened to Peter. He sank. And he cried out, Lord, save me. And what do you think the Lord did? You think the Lord just let him drown, let him go? Like, nah, you lost your faith in me. You can deal with it on your own. No. In verse 31, it says, and immediately, not after 5 seconds, not after 3 seconds, but immediately, Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? You see, right now we want to put our faith in our government and healthcare professionals, and it's all good. That it's good to put our faith in them because those are the professionals, and we need to listen to them. But we ultimately need to put our true faith and believe in God. He's the only one that's going to bring us through this pandemic that we're going through, this coronavirus. We need to have faith in Jesus that whatever happens is his will and that it happens for a reason. You see, I just found out today that I may not be leaving in July. There's talk that extensions are being pushed back, and even though, yes, it would be nice to get to the mainland and get closer to my family and my in-laws, I have to have faith in God that he knows what's best. And he does know what's best. Sometimes it's hard for us because we have that sin nature. But we need to believe in God, just like Peter did at first. When he first stepped out on that boat and he was able to walk on water. But we need to keep that faith in God. Like he said, Jesus reached down and immediately he caught Peter. and asked him, "Why did you start doubting me?" We should always have faith in him, just like Peter showed. Um, and continuing on in verse 32, and when they were coming to the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, "Of a truth, thou art the Son of God." You see, if we would just keep our faith in God, continue to trust him, and believe in what he says, he will his will is going to be done regardless of the situation. We just need to have that faith in God that what his will is the best for us. And I know that's hard. I know that's hard for all of us because, like I said, we're born with a sin nature. Just like Peter took his eyes off of God for 1 second and started looking at everything else around him instead of keeping his eyes straight on God. And what happened when he did? He sank. He was no longer floating, and he was sinking. He was out there, drowning, about to drown. But he immediately, even though he took his eyes off God and he lost faith in God, he still saved him immediately. We need to keep our eyes on Jesus. During this time, it's a rough time, and it's just going to continue to get worse. But we need to make sure that we have our faith in God. Do not lose your faith in God. Your parents are there to help you. You can have your faith in your parents and the doctors and all these professionals and experts. But the one that is ultimately going to save us from this is Jesus Christ. Like I said, I love each and every one of you. I hope y'all have a great night. And I will see you.